Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesdays, the official football podcast of Brew Sports. I'm Ian DeMars, and alongside me always is Ryan Solomon. And Ryan, we're in July, which means we're that much closer to training camp. It's an exciting time right now in the world of football.
Yeah, I also found out just seconds ago that July is apparently Ian's birthday month. Also, in other news, NBA free agency has started off with a bang. Not necessarily good news for the Bucks, but not necessarily bad news. And Summerfest, the world's largest music festival held in Milwaukee, is in full swing as well.
Yeah, it's a crazy time of the year. I know you had just mentioned you were at Summerfest a couple days ago. I was there a couple days ago as well. So it's a very exciting time just in the world in general, especially with NBA free agency. A couple of days ago, the start of free agency was definitely one of the wildest starts to the free agency period, I would say, ever in maybe the history of all sports.
Yeah, but you know who it's probably not a very exciting time for?
And who is that?
Ezekiel Elliott, who's
Yeah.
meeting with Roger Goodell to discuss the Las Vegas incident.
Yeah, dates back to his incident in May where he was detained, not arrested, but was detained for shoving, I believe it was a security guard or a police officer at an event in Las Vegas. Now, not sure what pending results could happen or what kind of consequences he could get from Roger Goodell, but how concerning should this be, or how concerning of a deal is this if you're Ezekiel Elliott or the Cowboys?
So I think that you can look at this in a few different ways. The way I look at this is that it should be concerning to Cowboys fans, but not because this is going to levy some large punishment. I think that you can liken this to when you get heartburn. It's not very pleasant to deal with at the time, and it's probably not going to lead to anything bad, but just the fact that it's happening leads you to believe that there could potentially be something wrong in the future with your heart or your stomach or some other part of your body. So I think that Ezekiel Elliott having to meet with the commissioner isn't going to lead to anything big, but I do think it's symptomatic of a greater problem with Ezekiel Elliott, which is that he doesn't understand the boundaries that he has to have in order to be a productive NFL player and productive member of society. And he seems to constantly be getting in trouble with not necessarily the law, but getting in trouble with the people around him, doing things that aren't smart. And I think that Cowboys fans should be worried about this because eventually he might push it too far. He might do something that's actually going to levy a severe punishment.
And it's in a time in the NFL where we're seeing a lot of big name players get involved with some bad things. You look at what happened with Kareem Hunt. You look at the ongoing case with Tyreek Hill. Obviously, past few years with the whole Ray Rice incident, Greg Hardy incident, there's just a lot of bad things happening to some of these star players in the NFL. And for this, for Ezekiel Elliott, obviously it's an issue. It's not as huge of an issue as we've seen with some of these other star players, but it is something you have to worry about. It's not his first time that he's been involved with some off-field issues. He has been suspended by the NFL before, 6 games a couple years ago. He's known for having some unique characteristics, looking at how he dressed when he was drafted, wearing the crop top. Look at some of his celebrations, some of his reactions on the sidelines, and especially his off-field incidents. This is something that the Cowboys do need to worry about going forward because he is the franchise right now for that team. Obviously, he's got have guys like Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper in that offense, but if you take one of them out, I think they're more replaceable than a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, who has been the dominant workhorse for that team over the past few years since he's come into the NFL. And if he doesn't get his character, if he doesn't get things straightened out and improve on his character, then who knows? We might not even see this guy in the NFL maybe somewhere down the line over the next couple of years.
Yeah, there's just so many things to worry about other than what particular punishment is going to be given out due to this incident, which could be very little. It's that this is your franchise guy. He doesn't seem to get it. He's going to do something dumb. Even if he doesn't do anything else dumb, is that really the kind of reputation you want your franchise player to have? Probably not. I mean, if you look around the NFL, it seems like teams are trying to get rid of distractions and get rid of people with disciplinary issues. And it's going to lead to a big controversy if he continues to have disciplinary issues because it's going to look bad for the Cowboys. It's going to look bad for Jerry Jones, and I don't think Jerry Jones wants that kind of negative publicity.
Yeah, he doesn't want the negative publicity, but knowing Jerry Jones, he doesn't shy away from publicity. So even if it's bad publicity, it's bringing attention to the Cowboys, which, in the words of Jerry Jones' mind, that's a good thing. But in this case, looking at it being one of your star players, you definitely have to start kind of reevaluating him and maybe possibly looking towards maybe having like a security deposit just in case something were to happen to Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe when training camp starts, bringing in a dependable veteran in case something happens, or maybe I'm not sure, but they're going to have to start reevaluating that position if these things continue to happen all year.
I feel like it would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall with that Roger Goodell, Ezekiel Elliott talk that's going to happen. I kind of picture it like a dad or a school counselor sitting like an 8-year-old kid down being like, now look, you can't be doing that kind of stuff at recess, Ezekiel, and then going from there. I think it'll be funny. I think that there's not really going to be any punishment. I think it's going to be like, look, guy, what are you doing? You have everything going for you and you continuously act stupid.
And that could be the case, but if this was his first offense of doing something, I could definitely see that. But since this isn't a first offense, I feel like it's going to be somewhere along those lines. But there is going to be those threats of, if this would have been worse, if you would have got arrested, maybe it's a heavier fine. Maybe it is a suspension. But because he was just detained and he wasn't arrested, it's probably just going to be a minimal fine, if anything, maybe no punishment or not. Who knows? But depending on the longevity of this meeting, that's going to kind of determine what actually will happen to Elliott.
I vote nothing will happen.
And I think nothing's going to happen as well. But that past history does bring into question if it's going to happen.
I still vote nothing's going to happen.
We'll have to wait and find out. They're set to meet this week. It should be a matter of time before we get those results. But let's switch topics now. So we had something exciting happen this past weekend for Marquise Goodwin. So this past weekend was the first year of the 40 yards of goal. It was to determine the fastest player in the NFL or just the world of football. The majority of the players that participated were NFL players, former or current players, and Marquise Goodwin actually won the race over Carolina Panthers defensive back Dante Jackson to win the prize of $1 million. Now, Marquise Goodwin, he's had past history of some success in the world of track and field. He's been in the Olympics. He was a very good talent when he was in college, when he ran track, especially in high school as well. So based off of what he just did this past weekend, do you think this is going to lead to a successful season for Goodwin?
I don't think it's going to mean anything one way or the other. I mean, what we found out is what we already knew, and that's that Marquise Goodwin is fast. And speed doesn't always equate to success in the NFL. We've brought him up almost every episode for the past 20 weeks, but Darius Hayward-Bay had very impressive speed coming into the NFL, and it did not help him achieve what you would have hoped for him to achieve. I think that Marquise Goodwin was a long jumper in the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you're right on with that.
Yep. But what's more interesting about this 40 yards of gold competition is that just a couple weeks ago, Ted Ginn made an announcement that he would race anybody for $10,000, yet he was a no-show at the event, even when teammate Alvin Kamara showed up. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. There were other names there as well. Robbie Anderson for the Jets actually did participate and won his heat. However, he chose not to participate throughout the rest of the competition. So that was a little bit surprising, especially for a guy who won his first heat to just drop out and pass out on $1 million.
Yeah, it seemed kind of odd, and I don't think they did that great of a job publicizing this event. You would think that if it was well publicized, if a lot of people wanted to see it happen, that people wouldn't be dropping out or bailing on it.
And who knows, maybe if they thought this was successful, then who knows? Maybe they can get some TV rights for this, and next year it can be on TV, and they can make a very exciting thing out of this. Because I think this could be a very exciting thing in the NFL. Heck, if you make this an event during the week of the Pro Bowl, I think that's going to get a lot of viewers to watch and pay attention to see who is the fastest in the NFL.
Yeah, they could definitely do more stuff like this. I mean, the dodgeball was kind of a big buzz when it started. I think it was last year, 2 years ago was the first year, and people were kind of excited to see that. You could add in other sports or other events, such as maybe like a 5-on-5 team basketball competition would be entertaining. More track and field events would be cool. Even like a golfing or something. There's interesting ways that you can make this sort of an Olympics for NFL players, I think.
Yeah, that definitely would be an exciting way to kind of change up the Pro Bowl a little bit. But I do think that this 40 yards of gold overall could find some success if they get enough people to do it, enough big names to do it. And then obviously, like I said, you have a well-known guy that kind of wins it. Like if an unknown guy won it this year, might not be as big a news, but because Goodwin won it and because of his past, it becomes big news.
I don't even know how big of a name most people think Marquise Goodwin is. He's a decent receiver. He's had some success, but I don't think he's a star by any means. But the problem with this event is that running is not an inherently entertaining thing to watch. It does bring a little bit more entertainment value that it's a competition style where it's kind of a head-to-head running thing, but it's not the most entertaining. So I don't know if people would be willing to watch it for an evening unless it was part of a greater event.
Do you think, I know a couple of years ago, they used to do these challenges on ESPN between like AFC and NFC players. It wasn't, I can't recall if it was part of the Pro Bowl, but it was kind of like a series that they did where they had football players do these kind of different challenges that you were kind of mentioning before. I feel like if maybe they re-implemented that and they included this in it, that it could be a very exciting thing for the NFL, whether they do it as a part of the Pro Bowl or just something to do in the offseason to generate buzz.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good way, if nothing else, to just talk to the viewers and be like, hey, NFL's still a thing. Don't pay attention to baseball or NBA free agency. NFL's still a thing.
Yeah, because the NFL, they do have that kind of down period after basically once free agency and the draft's done, where basically there's a couple months of no major things happening in the NFL unless it's news of a guy who gets injured for doing something at his house or a guy suddenly retiring. This is something that could make some big news for the NFL in the offseason, which would continue the buzz of keeping the NFL going throughout the whole year instead of having those stagnant months of little to no news.
I think that you're right about that. I think that they're going to have to see if they can expand this to be more entertaining than just a standalone event. And I think that's going to be the key to success of its longevity if it is something they decide to propagate.
Yeah, definitely. But who knows? We'll see if this event sticks around next year and if there's an opportunity for more big-time players to participate. But let's switch topics. So this offseason, while we're on the topic in the NFL, there were a lot of coaches that came and became the head coach of new places. We saw examples where Bruce Arians for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Cliff Kingsbury for the Cardinals, Freddie Kitchens for the Cleveland Browns, Matt LaFleur for the Packers, obviously Vic Fangio for the Broncos, Brian Flores for the Dolphins. We also had, trying to remember the other ones, Zach Taylor for the Bengals, and then Adam Gase for the New York Jets. So of these coaches that did get hired this offseason, which one of them do you think is the least likely to be the head coach of that team come 2020?
Yeah, it's a tough question because you have to think what needs to go wrong for you to be fired after one season as an NFL coach. And so I did this systematically and tried to use some logic. I tried to eliminate coaches that are expected to have a long-term project. So even though Cliff Kingsbury is a guy that a lot of people question the hiring of, he has a rookie quarterback, and they kind of paired those two together. So even if you don't see immediate success out of Kyler Murray, I think they're going to want to see how that plays out. I eliminated teams that are probably going to be better this year than they were last year, such as the Green Bay Packers. I'm assuming that whether LaFleur is a good coach or not, the Packers are going to find a way to improve upon last year's results. And that leaves us with a couple of teams with coaches that are questionable, that are not most likely going to have great seasons, and that's Brian Flores for the Dolphins and Zach Taylor for the Bengals. Now, if you look at both of these guys, they're in sort of a transitional period for their team. Brian Flores is taking over a Dolphins team that might not be worse than last year, but I really guarantee it's not going to be good. I know you have some disagreement on this, but I could see this team being incredibly bad. And if it just completely hits the floor and you don't see any life from this team or any spark out of this team, I think it could be possible that they're looking for a new coach to go with a potentially new quarterback, a new rookie quarterback, the next couple of seasons. If you look at Zach Taylor, the Bengals are kind of set to have a regime change at quarterback if Andy Dalton doesn't produce. So if Zach Taylor can't get anything out of Dalton, then they're going to be looking elsewhere for a quarterback, and you never know. The quarterback that just got hired to be your head coach could be on his way out then as well.
Yeah, so are you leaning more towards Flores in this case, Taylor? Do you think that they're both kind of on equal ground?
I think it's about a 50-50 for each of them. I would say that Zach Taylor probably has more of a chance of being fired because I think Miami is already accepted as a project that's going to take some time more than the Bengals. I think the Bengals are looking to try to do something with their offense, with Andy Dalton, with A.J. Green, with some of these other pieces that they have. And I think they expect a little bit more than the Dolphins probably do. But I think it could go either way.
Yeah, and those coaches are kind of in tough situations. Flores, you look at taking over a team that a lot of people are expecting. I know you are a main one that could possibly struggle a lot this year and end up winding up with the number one pick next year. Zach Taylor was a unique hiring because a lot of people thought their issue last year was the defense, not the offense, and they hired an offensive-minded head coach after they fired a defensive-minded head coach. So I do think that could be the possibility. But I think one coach that I'm a little curious about, and he's had some decent success, but I don't think it's going to be Adam Gase. I think Adam Gase could be the guy that maybe just lasts one season. The reason why I'm saying this is because you look at the team, you look at some of the moves they did this offseason, getting a guy like Le'Veon Bell, getting a guy like C.J. Mosley, you have a young quarterback in Sam Darnold. This team they're in a weird situation where they still need to rebuild a little bit, but you have a couple of big-time playmakers that want to win immediately, and that's not what they're in a position to do. They're in a position to compete. They're not in a position to be in the playoffs right away. In fact, I'm not sure if it's going to be this year. It's probably going to be a couple years at least before we see this team in the playoffs just because of some of the young pieces that they have. I think that Gase, the reason why that he would be the one likely to leave or to get fired after a year is because he might be a good quarterback coach. Yes, but when he was with the Dolphins, they didn't necessarily have that much success. I believe he did make one playoff appearance, but do remember that playoff appearance was with a backup quarterback, and they struggled mightily in their playoff game against the Pittsburgh Steelers a few years ago. So, and I'm not fully set on some of the stuff that the Jets did this offseason. When you hired him, you also fired your GM, and you named this guy your temporary GM. Obviously, the spot's been filled at this point, but it's still kind of an interesting fact that you hire this guy, and then you make him you make him fill multiple positions, and he hasn't even coached a game. He hasn't coached a game for that team. It's a little bit concerning. I wasn't a huge fan of this hiring in general, so I think they need to worry a little bit. And they're going to be put in a position where they could improved based off of last year, but some of the players want to win now. So if they don't make the playoffs this year, it's very likely that Adam Gase could be gone.
Some of them want to win now, but I don't know if the expectation is that they're capable of winning now. The thing that I would say lends credence to your hypothesis that Adam Gase could be the one to go, though, is that he coaches in the pressure cooker that is the New York City market. And so that fan base has expected winning for a while now and constantly get losing. So if the Jets start out poorly, I think they're already going to be calling for Adam Gase's head. If he can build up some equity with that fan base, get some early wins, maybe beat some teams that he's not supposed to beat, take one off the Patriots, then I think his job is going to be a lot more secure. But I think it's key for him to start out strong and not start out with like a 1-3, 0-4, 0-2 type record. He has to do something there to get people to trust him.
Yeah, and the thing is, with him, he's going up against one of the coaches that got hired in his division. He's going to see him twice during the season. That is Brian Flores. So it could be a case where of their two matchups, if one team goes 2-0, that team that goes 0-2 could more than likely lose their head coach after the year.
Yeah, it's very possible. And you always have to look out for something happening where players start to lose respect for the coach. You never even know who it's going to be. It could be somebody that we don't expect it all to all of a sudden lose the players. It happens very quickly in the NFL sometimes. And that's what makes it difficult to predict is you don't know how the coach is going to interact with the players in the locker room. You don't know if the players are going to have a revolt at some point in time. Winning cures a lot of things. Losing makes a lot of things worse. Which team is going to surprisingly be bad or worse than we think with a new head coach? I mean, even LaFleur and Rodgers already sort of butting heads. If that doesn't work out, he could be gone right away. You just never really know.
Yeah, very true. I think it's going to be interesting. Do you think that there could be a case where maybe multiple first-year coaches this year may not make it into their second year?
I think it would be very rare for that to happen. I think it's rare when one coach doesn't get to come back and try a second season. I think you really have to decide either that you made the wrong choice in that hire or you have to have your eye on somebody better who's coming available. And I don't see that happening twice in one season.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely that would happen. We have seen it over the last couple of years, though, with at least one first-year head coach getting fired. So that trend, I do think is possible, will continue. But if it does reach that point where it is multiple, then there's going to be a question of how thoroughly did each team do at their coaching search.
Yeah, that is. I would agree with that.
All right.
Oh, you can do our transition, Ian.
All right. So now we're going to transition into our results from last week's question of the week. Now, last week's question of the week kind of focused on the second-year quarterbacks in the AFC East. So there's Sam Darnold for the Jets, Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills, and then Josh Rosen for the Miami Dolphins. The question of the week focused of those three quarterbacks, which one has the most to prove this upcoming season? If you're on Facebook, you had the choices between Darnold and Allen, the guys who for sure plan on starting for their teams. Twitter had three options, including Rosen, due to the fact that he's still kind of in a quarterback competition. The results were a little bit split on Facebook. The results were leaning towards Sam Darnold. He had over 60% of votes. And then on Twitter, it was actually Josh Rosen who won the vote. It was a pretty close vote on Twitter as well. So I know we both kind of discussed this last week. We both kind of had different takes on this. After what we've seen, are you changing your mind at all on your pick, or are you still kind of firm on what you picked last week?
I think that there's nothing that happened that would make my mind change. I don't think that there's any difference that happened this week compared to last week. I think that we will have to wait for preseason to start to see what happens with the Josh Rosen quarterback competition in order to decide if there's increased or decreased pressure on any of these guys.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at if Rosen does end up starting this year, there's going to be a lot for him to prove. If he doesn't start, that's not necessarily a bad thing on Rosen's part. because he's going to get that opportunity, whether it's this year or next year. Also, kind of depends on their record, but I do think they all have something to prove. I still think that Rosen has a lot to prove, but really, I think since none of these guys had success their first year, that they have a lot to prove.
Yeah, I still think there's a big difference between who has the most pressure and who has the most to prove. So I think Josh Rosen, you could make a very good case that he has the most to prove because he's done the least. But he also has probably the least amount of pressure on him because he has the lowest expectations right now. I mean, he's playing for a team that could be trying to tank to get a number 1 overall pick and draft a quarterback. So no one's hopes are necessarily riding on Josh Rosen right now in that Miami organization.
You make a good point right there, Ryan. Like I said, they aren't necessarily in win-now mode, so definitely a good case right there. Let's focus more towards our upcoming question of the week. It has not been posted yet. It's going to get posted on Tuesday or over the next day or two for us on Facebook and Twitter. So definitely do check out both those pages for our question of the week. But our question of the week is going to be focusing on a couple of rookie quarterbacks. And they're both in the NFC East. It's Daniel Jones for the Giants, Dwayne Haskins for the Redskins. Of those two quarterbacks, which one is going to start more games this year? Is it going to be Daniel Jones? Is it going to be Dwayne Haskins? Ryan, I'll have you answer this question first. I'm kind of curious to see where you are on this based off of your NFC East prediction last week.
Right. That should actually give you a very clear view of where I am because I picked the Giants to win their division, and I picked them to win because I think Eli Manning is going to have a bounce-back year, which to me indicates that Daniel Jones is not going to get a look at starting. The only way Daniel Jones starts is if Eli really struggles and they're out of the playoff picture. And even in that case, they might let Eli just finish the year and then push him to retire or get rid of him. Because we saw the backlash that happened after he lost his starting job for one game. And that basically led to Ben McAdoo getting fired. So I don't think Eli Manning is going to be relinquishing his starting role this year, and I think he's actually going to have a solid season. The Redskins, on the other hand, you don't know what's happening with that mess at quarterback. Colt McCoy might be playing. Alex Smith, there's still a huge question mark around him. I would be surprised if Dwayne Haskins didn't get a look at the starting job at some point during the season for Washington.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I do think Haskins is the guy that's going to get more starts. I think he has the best opportunity to start right away of the two, just because it seems like it's more of an open competition in Washington, where New York, it seems like it's going to be Eli Manning's possibly last run. If they are struggling, we might see that opportunity where they transition Jones to start the last 3 games of the season. But Haskins, you'll get that situation in Washington. Colt McCoy, a known backup, not much of a starter. Case Keenum has been a known backup, but started over the last couple of years and has showed some good things, but has also been inconsistent. Dwayne Haskins, it's a win-win for the Redskins because if he starts and he does well, it's a great thing. If he starts and he plays bad, it's okay because he is basically going to be your guy going forward because we really don't know what's going to happen with Alex Smith because of that leg injury. So I do think it will be Haskins. I'm not sure. I don't think he's going to start all 16 games for them, but I could see at least maybe 10 games.
Yeah, I just think he's going to start at some point, and we don't know what combination they're going to have to throw him out there. It's shocking every preseason who actually gets to start. We were surprised when Baker Mayfield got to start last season. Before that, we were surprised when DeShone Kizer started. It's always surprising to hear which players end up taking the starting job and for what the reason is behind it. I think it depends on which direction the Redskins want to go with this. If they want to try to let Haskins sit, preserve him for the long haul, or if they're going to throw him out there right now and see what they have in him. It seems like that franchise was very, very into Dwayne Haskins and believes that he is the hope for the future. I think if you really believe he's the hope for the future, you have to handle him correctly here, because if you throw him out there behind an offensive line that has holes in it, then he might be damaged goods for the rest of his career. We've seen that happen with numerous quarterbacks, most of all David Carr. So I think you have to be careful in the handling of the situation if you believe that he's actually the franchise quarterback.
Yeah, handling's going to be key, not just for the Redskins, but for the Giants as well. So they got to make sure they know when to put the guy in. You look at Eli Manning when he was a rookie. Remember, he didn't start for till about halfway through his rookie year, struggled a little bit, but you want to know what? The guys won a couple of Super Bowls. So the Giants knew what they were doing, and I think both these organizations are going to do the right thing and know when it's the right time to put their quarterbacks in. So again, that's
I would trust them to know the right time to do it. I mean, these franchises have been dysfunctional over the past 5 seasons.
That's a very good point right there. But we'll see if they've overcome some of the mistakes. But again, this question, it will be up on Facebook and Twitter all week, so do keep an eye out for it when it does come out on those social media platforms over the next day or two. But let's switch subjects. So the last couple of weeks, we've been starting to preview the upcoming NFL season. A couple weeks ago, we looked at the AFC. Last week, we looked at the NFC. We picked our division winners and made some surprise picks and bold predictions. This week, we're going to take a different look. Now we're going to look at the teams that are going to compete, but they're not going to win the division, but they will make the playoffs as a wild card. So, Ryan, let's start off with the AFC. So, of the 2 wild card slots in the AFC, who do you have filling those slots?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's always difficult to pick this early in the season. I have 2 teams that are surprisingly in this selection or in this section, and not because we don't expect them to make the playoffs, but because we probably expect them to win their division, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Indianapolis Colts. So as we went through our division winners and our previews the last couple of weeks, I thought that the Chargers would win the AFC West, and I thought that the Jaguars would surprisingly win the AFC South, which leaves these 2 teams on the outside looking in. But I do think that they're good enough, if not to win the division, to get the wild card, and that's why I have the Chiefs and the Colts there in those 2 spots.
Yeah, both definitely very solid picks. It's kind of hard to see the Chiefs not making the playoffs, especially what they did last year. And the same thing with the Colts, because both those teams definitely surprised a lot of people last year. So definitely it'd be tough to see them not making the playoffs this year. Even if they don't win the division, I know I had them winning both my picks. You as wild card, you picking them as wild cards, definitely a good pick right there. I'm going to go with a team that you actually picked to win the division first, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. This team is going to compete in that division for sure. They're going to be very close to winning that division, just like last year, but I do think that it's going to be tough to overcome the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion. So that's why one of the teams that I have winning that division is going to be the Chargers. And then the other team, I'm going to go with the Houston Texans. I think they take a little bit of a step back this year, but I do have a lot of faith in that team. If they stay healthy, get some things working, that is going to be a very dangerous team. And unfortunately, last year we didn't get to see some of that develop in the playoffs. They kind of fell stagnant when they played the Colts. But I do trust Deshaun Watson. I trust that team when they're healthy. Look after this team. I think they're going to win one of the wild card slots and possibly pull an upset wild card weekend.
It seems we have very mixed feelings about the AFC South division.
Yeah, especially when I still remember you picking the Jags. I was very shocked, but I do remember how you're a big fan of Nick Foles.
And you should also remember how I correctly picked the Super Bowl last year, and I think I've earned some credit for that for at least the calendar year.
Yeah, I'll definitely give you some credit on that. When it comes to picking those big-time games, you definitely had the edge over me so far.
Yeah, that division is going to be very interesting the whole season because it's really been a toss-up the last couple of years. There was question marks about how Andrew Luck could come back from injury. There was question marks about the Texans early in there because they looked bad and looked like they couldn't protect Deshaun Watson at all. The Jaguars looked like a Super Bowl contender until last year happened. So it's hard to say who's going to rise up in that division and really take the crown because we've seen the infrastructure of the Jaguars team clearly good enough to make a good push. And the only question is, will Nick Foles be able to make that team band together enough to actually be good again?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these picks end up turning out to be. Let's look at the NFC now. So we discussed this last week. So we both were in agreement that the Packers would win the North, and then we were split on our other division. So I'm very excited to see who do you have for your NFC wildcards?
Yep. So I think you're going to like this pick because you're high on Jimmy G, and I'm going with the San Francisco 49ers. I think that with Jimmy Garoppolo, that adds enough to this team to give them the offensive firepower to push past a lot of other opponents in their division. I don't think they're going to be able to surpass the Rams, though. So I have the 49ers taking a wild card spot. And then I also have the Atlanta Falcons. I think that the NFC South is too good to only get one team in. And so I think the Falcons are going to be a little better than the Panthers this year. Cam Newton's health is sort of a question mark still. I know you're big on the Panthers, and I bet you're going to pick the Panthers and probably another team from the NFC West. The surprise here is that I left off another NFC North team because that division has been traditionally good the past 5 years. I just see the Vikings and the Bears both regressing this year. I don't know if the Vikings would be regressing. Maybe the Vikings are staying the same, but I see the Bears coming back to earth after a very surprising 2018 campaign.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening, especially with how you made your bold predictions regarding Mitchell Trubisky. So I do like the picks that you do make. The 49ers, I think, are a team on the rise when they're healthy. They had a lot of injury issues last year. Jimmy G, Jerick McKinnon. They also had a couple receivers go down. So if they can stay healthy, that team is going to be a unique team to look out for. And the Falcons, when they have all the pieces playing together, they're a very dangerous team. And it just seems like almost every year they struggle to keep all those pieces together, and that's why they end up struggling. So if they can keep those pieces together, that team will be a playoff team. I'm going to go with my first team, the Rams. I think they're still going to be dangerous. For some reason, there's something in me saying that it's going to be tough for them to keep things going based off of last year. They had a huge letdown in the Super Bowl. I think that they're going to come hungry after that big loss, but I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover after that, you could say, an embarrassing performance that they put up against the New England Patriots. My other team that I also like the pick that you made. That's why I'm going to go with the Falcons as well, which means I don't have the same.
I'm surprised by that.
And I've always been a fan of how the Falcons play football. I've been a huge fan of Matt Ryan since he's been in the league. Julio Jones, one of the best receivers in the league. Devontae Freeman can be a top 5 running back when he stays healthy, but he's had that health issue over the last few years. And this defense, when they have some good young pieces on defense, they've just been very injury plagued over these last few years, unfortunately. So we haven't really gotten to see how this team can develop on defense. But when they're all healthy, and that's going to be the key, if they stay healthy, then this team is going to be a playoff team. So that's why I am in agreement with you saying that the Falcons are going to be the other wild card in the NFC.
I'm a little shocked that you're in agreement with me about the Falcons. I didn't see that one coming.
Well, I know one of my good friends from Michigan, he's a big-time Falcons fan. So whenever we start talking about the NFC, he's always making sure that I talk about the Falcons, especially if they got a big signing or what sort. So I got to go with him on this one. I trust his gut. He might not be feeling it as much as I am, but I think that they're going to make it to the playoffs this year.
All right. They are always a team that is boom or bust. It seems very rare that they have an average season. They're either underachieving by a lot or make it to the Super Bowl and should have won.
Yeah, right on. So I'm very excited to see how our picks turn out. Obviously, we're still a couple months out, so a lot of things could change, not just in the NFL, but our perspectives itself. So it'll be interesting to see when it gets closer to the season if we're sticking with these picks or if we make some sort of changes. That'll be interesting to find out. But let's move on. We are getting towards the end of the show, which means we're going to be talking about one of our favorite things, and that's fantasy football. So over these last few weeks, we've been doing our rankings. We've ranked all the positions for fantasy football now. This week, we're going to still do some rankings, but a little bit of a different look at it. So we're going to rank the top 5 fantasy teams. Now, what we mean by that is the NFL teams are going to do the best based off of fantasy football scoring. So you look at example, look at the Rams. They have a very good setup with Todd Gurley, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp coming back, and then obviously Jared Goff. So they have a very good setup over there to possibly be in a top 5 scenario. So Ryan, who do you have as your top 5 for overall fantasy?
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the Rams. I do have them in there. I'll start lowest to highest. So at number 5, I have the Dallas Cowboys, and I tried to pick teams throughout this list that have at least 3 players that could get you really good, productive fantasy points, and the Cowboys have that. Ezekiel Elliott, obviously a monster as long as he doesn't get arrested or detained by someone before the season starts. Amari Cooper showed that he was a good player last year, and even though I don't think he's going to have the same type of season, he's a clear number 1 receiver on that team, especially with Cole Beasley moving elsewhere, so he should be getting a lot of looks. And then Dak Prescott, a guy that sometimes has been a big-time bust in fantasy football, should at least have enough to be a decent quarterback this year for the Cowboys and for fantasy owners, maybe as a quarterback that you can plug in if yours has a bye or something like that. But I think Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper are a really good 1-2 fantasy punch to have for Dallas. Then number 4, I have the Los Angeles Rams. They have Jared Goff, who's going to get numbers just because of how that offense works. Todd Gurley, if he's healthy, is obviously the workhorse in that offense. And then they have Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Brandon Cooks, 3 guys that can all amass a good total of fantasy points, especially apparently when the Rams play the Chiefs, in which case everybody scores a ton of fantasy points. Then at number 3, I have a team that you've been really high on all year, and that's the Cleveland Browns. Let's face it, the Cleveland Browns are absolutely loaded on offense with their personnel. Baker Mayfield has tons of people to throw to, so he should be a dark horse to have a lot of fantasy points. They have Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., Njoku, Chubb. The list goes on and on with players that can make a big impact, can score a lot of fantasy points for you, so that team is loaded. Then the top 2, Kansas City Chiefs at number 2 with Patrick Mahomes, Damian Williams, and probably Tyreek Hill. We'll see how that plays out. That's going to be a big factor in how this team does this year, I think, because other than Tyreek Hill, they do not have a lot going on at wide receiver. And then number 1, I have the team that I predict will win the Super Bowl this year, the Saints, with Alvin Kamara, Drew Brees, and Michael Thomas. Those 3 are going to be fantasy monsters, especially with Mark Ingram not taking any touches away from Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, I definitely do like the list that you put out. I like the way you played it out, looking at the team's big 3 options. So I do like the list, and that list, I think legit could be top 5 for sure. I don't have the exact same list as you, but I do like everything that you put in your list. I'll go into mine now. So number 5, I actually have the Green Bay Packers in my top 5. And the reason why is because Devontae Adams took huge steps last year, becoming, you could say, a top 5 receiver in the league. Aaron Rodgers, when he's healthy, obviously is up there for one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league. And Aaron Jones has lost some weight. He's looked slimmer this offseason. I think he's set to possibly have a monster year for the Green Bay Packers. And they have some very good secondary, younger pieces as well. Jamal Williams in the backfield. You look at, they also drafted a guy out of Notre Dame. You also have receivers. You got Geronimo Allison coming back from injury, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Equanimous St. Brown, Jake Kumerow. There have been talks about Trevor Davis getting some opportunities, Jimmy Graham. They have a lot of potential, and I think that potential is going to rise to the occasion this year, and that's why I have them in my top 5. Number 4, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. I'm high on this team, as you had mentioned, but I am a little curious to see how it's going to work spreading the ball all around between Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. I think Baker Mayfield's going to put up a lot of numbers. I think Nick Chubb has that potential, and possibly Kareem Hunt if he gets that opportunity this year once the suspension's done. But I think that they are going to put up a lot of numbers fantasy-wise. It's just a matter of how are they going to spread it out evenly among their stars. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. I think that they're in a position right now, assuming things are okay with Ezekiel Elliott, to take a huge step this year. Dak Prescott, he's shown some strides from his rookie year. It's just a matter of putting it all together for a whole season. We saw him do it his rookie year. If he's able to do it again this year, look out. Ezekiel Elliott, we've seen what he's done. Amari Cooper was a huge playmaker for them after the trade last year. They got Randall Cobb. They have some good young pieces on that team and some veteran leadership that could be a factor. And let's not forget, Jason Witten's out of retirement, so definitely got to look out for him. being a factor in fantasy this year. Number 2, I actually have the Atlanta Falcons. This is a
You're
team.
high on the Falcons again.
I am. This team, they always put up good numbers fantasy wise. There are the question marks about, can Julio Jones get you some touchdowns? Yes, I know that's an issue, but he's going to get you double digits every game, whether that's receiving or a low receiving game with some touchdowns. He's going to get you double digits. They throw the ball a lot in that offense, and you look at Devontae Freeman, he's going to be the lead horse in that backfield now with Tevin Coleman no longer on that team. So he's going to get a lot more opportunities, and he's going to show why he was one of the best running backs a couple years ago. He could reemerge and be one of the stars in fantasy this upcoming season. They also have a couple nice young pieces, Mohamed Sanu, Calvin Ridley. They have some good pieces. I think that this team is set to break out this year and kind of bounce back after a couple of disappointing season last year. And then number 1, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. And you might be a little bit surprised on why I don't have a team like the Los Angeles Rams, as you had mentioned before. I'll go into that after, but I just think after what Patrick Mahomes did last year, I think he might have a little bit of a setback, but it's not going to be that big where he's going to suddenly fall off the charts in fantasy. I think he's going to stay up there towards the top. Damian Williams showed enough last year that he can fit into that system and work really well. So I think he's set for a big year in fantasy. Travis Kelce, obviously one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Having him on your team definitely helps. If Tyreek Hill plays, that definitely helps. But if he doesn't, I can see Mahomes finding or giving the ball to any receiver on that team. So definitely look out for some unknowns possibly taking over in fantasy for them in the receiving area. Now, I'm going to explain why I don't have the Rams in my top 5. And the reason why is I'm still a little bit concerned about Todd Gurley. This guy's been a workhorse for that team over the last couple of years, and we saw it take in effect for him towards the end of last year. Had a little bit of a knee issue. They signed C.J. Anderson. There were games where they were splitting equal carries. We especially noticed in the NFC Championship game where Gurley was basically a non-factor. He really wasn't too much of a factor in the Super Bowl for them either. So until I see him say that he's all good, I'm not saying that his knee is just pretty good. I need him to say that it's perfectly fine. He's 100%. He's better than ever. It feels great. Once I hear that, then I can put this team in my top 5. But until then, I'm leaving them out.
I think the one constant that we got right on these lists is that when the quarterback is a big fantasy point guy, you know the rest of the team has to get fantasy points someplace. So when a running back scores a touchdown, the team is running back centric. Not everybody on the team is going to have big numbers, but when it's the quarterback, you know at least one other player or probably more on the team is also scoring big fantasy points.
Yeah, and it's all about having those pieces. So if you have an issue with one of those pieces or you're missing that piece, then none of it's going to come together. I think all our lists kind of explain why we did that. We focus on the main 3 positions, and if there's an issue, that's why they were left out or why they weren't mentioned. So
yeah, you know, one team we both didn't mention, which is interesting though, is the New England Patriots. And they're the one team that seems to break the mold in terms of additional players getting reliable touches and fantasy points. Because the Patriots are almost too diverse in who's going to be handling the ball on their team. Any given week, it seems like a third-string running back, a second-string tight end breaks out and has 2 or 3 touchdowns. And it's almost unpredictable other than that Tom Brady is going to get you decent fantasy points.
Yeah, I do think that was a little bit surprising that none of us did do that. I do think that it is a case, though, where, I think a factor has to do with no Rob Gronkowski. He's been a big help for them fantasy-wise over these last few years since he's been in the league. So not having him could be a little bit questioning regarding how they're going to find success fantasy-wise.
You see, we always say that, and yet they end up winning Super Bowls with or without players that we think are going to be big losses for them.
You're right on right there, right? I can't disagree with you on that one.
I think until Tom Brady's retired Bill Belichick's moved on and Robert Kraft is officially in prison is the only time that we're actually going to see the Patriots be a normal team.
Yeah, like I said, no arguing with you on there. But with that said, Ryan, that does bring us to this week's conclusion of Touchdown Tuesdays. What final thoughts do you have for the viewers this week?
Thanks, everyone, for continuing to listen and support us. I hope that you enjoy hearing our thoughts and comments on the NFL as much as we do spouting them off. You can catch us live on the weeknight that we broadcast. If you're into hearing it very late at night, you can also catch us on Google Play, iTunes, Spreaker. Is there anything else I'm forgetting on that front?
iTunes, Google Play, Spreaker. I think you're all set on there.
All set on that. And then also continue to check out our basketball podcast run by Eric Klemrowski, Run It Back, especially with NBA free agency happening in full swing. You're going to want to hear his thoughts on it. He's very passionate about the NBA, and it's always interesting to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, Eric's definitely very excited at this point in the year, especially with whatever the Bucks do. He's a huge Bucks fan, so if something's happening with the Bucks, you definitely need to ask him for his thoughts on it. But yeah, do want to thank everyone again for listening to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesdays. Again, we are the official football podcast of Brew Sports. Listen to us each week on iTunes, Google Play, and Spreaker. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. We did just hit the over 300 followers plateau on Twitter, so keep following us, keep liking us, do what you got to do to spread the word for us. Like I said, we'll keep an eye out for our question of the week. We'll get this episode posted on the pages as well over the next couple of days. And again, just want to thank you for listening this week. We're very excited with football near here for us. CFL has been going for the last couple of weeks, but we're very close to the NFL starting with training camp. So thank you again for listening this week. We'll be back with more NFL news next week.